Who are some people you know personally, or otherwise, who ruined their own lives, and how? Meth. Less than 6 months between getting into it and the police pulling his body out of river. A buddy from high school blew through a stop sign and hit a couple of motorcyclists, killing them both. He didn't stop to render aid and fled the scene. He was busted for vehicular manslaughter, and spent 12 years in prison. He's lucky he can work for his dad, because where he lives now is not kind to felons trying to rehabilitate. Took out a mortgage on his house and leveraged all his other assets to go all in on Luna Coin. It worked beautifully until it didn't. Staying in bad relationships, doubling down and marrying and having children. Now they have the same relationship problems that they had 10 years ago, but with children involved. I knew a few folks in college who got hooked on meth and never pulled themselves out of it, but the funnier story is a guy I knew in college who stayed in line all night to buy a PS2, which caused him to totally blow off a big lab report, which ultimately meant he had to switch his major. Friend's daughter called in multiple bomb threats to a local high school. She got caught and convicted. She was 18 at the time, so adult record. Edit. This was post 9/11 and didn't happen in the US. From what I understand, she didn't like a teacher and was having issues. Don't know the details. It was dozens of threats over the course of months. The police responses cost several million and the whole community felt terrorized. She pleaded guilty and got a 3-month conditional sentence. Someone in our friend group keeps having kids with people and then leaving, fucking him financially because of child support. He can't hold any jobs, and has stolen from friends. Right now he's crashing on one of my friend's couches. I dunno why they are allowing him to stay there. A spoiled kid from a well-off family in a nearby small town, so big fish in little pond, around age 20, was having a party at his house. He jokingly pulled an old antique handgun out from a drawer and aimed it at a friend of his, also maybe around 20 years old. You can guess what happened next. I know a guy who killed a girl in a hit and run, then went back out that night. Walked around town like nothing happened for like 6 months before his friend turned him in, and now he'll be in prison for like 8 years. Don't drink and drive. I know someone with 8 kids by 7 different guys. All boys. And she still wants a girl. The kids call every new guy dad. I'm pretty sure she had 7 kids by the time she was 25. She's in her 30s now. She'll never end up with a decent guy. Poor kids. They all have goofy names that rhyme. I'm talking names that nobody else on the planet has. I work in project management for construction. I have seen many apprentices fall into the pit of alcohol-drug addiction within the first couple of years of them being on the job and losing everything. Thankfully, it tends to happen earlier in their life, so some of them are able to recover and bounce back. Others aren't so lucky. Another is my best friend in high school. He became a drug dealer and dropped out before graduating. He eventually got caught on camera selling a couple of kilograms of cocaine to an informant and served several years in prison. I was a kid when this happened, but a guy in town shot himself in the stomach because he'd left his wife for his mistress, who'd then chickened out on leaving her husband. What made it super bizarre and big news was that he was the dare officer at the local elementary school, where she was the principal. He survived, and both were run out of town. Weed wasn't enough anymore when he went to college, so he and a buddy went to a doctor known to write scripts for Xanax and Oxy. Got hooked on Oxy. His parents spent thousands on exploratory surgery to find the pain issue he convinced them he had. Then rehab to get him clean. Then he heard fentanyl was out there and stronger than heroin, and he found some and died. I dated someone who became a raging alcoholic at the age of 44. Lost his license, his relationship, his car, his job and his son. Dude had a great life and threw it all away for freaking booze. I got to keep his son as my own, so I got the better end of the deal. My auntie and one of her daughters. They live in a cycle of violence. My auntie got married to a druggy violent man, had 4 kids, every single one today deals with trauma. One of her daughters ended up getting in the same trap as her mother, had 3 kids all from different fathers, the dads were all involved in crime drugs. She ended up getting killed by one of the fathers. She was just 32. Her kids now are dealing with the trauma of her loss. Her oldest child was 13 when she died. We're pretty distant, but I feel a lot for them. Friend could not stop drinking to his detriment. Lost his first family, multiple jobs, another relationship that was great for him. Nope, he does not have a drinking problem. He also lives in the past since all the good stuff in his life happened 20+ years ago and he cannot stop talking about it. My wife kept someone who attached themselves to her as the best friend. We moved closer to them and everything. Then things unraveled. This friend started off as a bit eccentric. Then controlling. Then an obvious need to be the center of all attention. Then was asked to leave the house. Turned out she was overemphasizing her kids' illnesses, raised thousands to cure him and ended up in court for scamming people to pay for a holiday she could already afford just for the attention. Ruined her and her famies, lives just to be, as the term is now, the main character. A friend of mine thought that he won't get addicted to cocaine. Last time I saw him was a photo of him on his obituary. My sister keeps having kids with all the deadbeats she gets engaged to. Can't keep a job, always bumming off friends and family to fund her hobbies while struggling to be a single mother. Cousin who got into heroin and then later fent. Crashed an old car that was gifted to him 2 months after being given it and stole from the family, so most of the family doesn't talk to him anymore. He comes around every few months asking for money now. My friend Marco accidentally ran over his younger sister with his car, leaving her with severe brain damage. He right away spiraled downwards, started using heroin, got kicked out of his house on his 18th birthday, did a stint in jail, and then committed suicide. All in the span of around 18 months after the incident. An old college friend did the triple of drink, drugs, and driving. Put himself into a 6-week coma. When he came round he had to relearn everything. He has permanent brain damage, can't work, can't keep up with a hobby, walks with a severe limp, and spends all his time drinking. He's just existing, apathetic, waiting to die. A kid back in my high school days was always drinking and driving in his souped-up Civic and would go drift on dirt roads. He would show up to parties, get smashed, then go driving around with whoever would go with him. One night I guess he talked 2 girls that were only 16, he was 18, to go for a ride. Well, he went too crazy and rolled the car, nobody had seatbelts, the poor girls were ejected and died. He lived. He was sentenced to something like 40 years for manslaughter. An old friend got arrested for suspected DUI and was at the station making his one phone call. The cop asked him to get off the phone after a few minutes and instead of hanging up, he turned around and punched the cop square in the nose. He ended up doing a year in prison for that and dying of cancer a few years later. I have a very good friend that I grew up with and is currently serving life without the possibility of parole for taking someone else's life. This one girl I knew started sleeping around and told a bunch of dudes she was on birth control. She wasn't, and last I heard she has 5 children from 5 different dudes. The guys obviously skipped town and she moved in with her parents, got roommates, and can't hold a job. I feel really bad for those kids. Me, I ruined my life. Drugs and mental illness. Lost a game of Russian roulette. Lost their life and ruined their families' lives. SIL is a train wreck. Ruined her marriage, ruined her relationship with her kids, lost her house and car, all to be with some abusive piece of crap. Smart and personable high school valedictorian who went on to complete a JD in a prestigious law program and then be offered scholarships for doctoral work was arrested and had his face plastered all over local news for recording upskirt videos at our city's fair. My ex-husband is in jail right for shooting his GF. She survived but is looking at 10 to 40 years unamused face. Cousin of mine always talked about being a millionaire by 30 as his goal with all sorts of failed business ideas. He got married, had a kid, had a job as a linesman making great money, especially when they'd bring him in the aftermath of disasters ex-hurricanes. He wasted it all on harebrained get-rich-quick schemes he swore the next one would hit. Cost him his marriage, which spiraled into opioid abuse and being dead at 40, leaving a teenage son with no dad. He couldn't cope with a good hard-working life that failed to measure up to his youthful ambitions and destroyed him.